The signal we wished we'd never heard. Dr. James Kovac had been listening to the universe for 17 years. In all that time, the cosmos had been beautifully, devastatingly silent. Until August 17th. At 3:47 a.m., the radio telescope array at Atacama picked it up first, a repeating pulse from deep space, roughly 840 light-years away. Within 6 hours, every major observatory on Earth had confirmed it. The signal was structured, mathematical, and utterly impossible to dismiss as natural. For 3 glorious days, James and his team at the SETI Institute worked around the clock, fueled by coffee and the kind of manic excitement that comes once in a species' lifetime. They'd found it. Actual proof. Humanity was not alone. Then they started decoding it. "It's not a message," James's colleague Dr. Yuki Tanaka said on the 4th day, her voice hollow with exhaustion and growing unease. "It's coordinates, velocity calculations, trajectory adjustments." James stared at the waterfall display of data cascading across his monitor. She was right. The signal wasn't trying to communicate with anyone. It was navigational data, the kind of telemetry a spacecraft might broadcast to synchronize with other vessels or update a home base on its position. "How fast is it moving?" he asked, though part of him didn't want to know. Yuki's fingers flew across her keyboard. The calculation took 7 minutes. When the answer appeared, she went pale. "0.47 light speed," she whispered. James, at that velocity, accounting for when the signal originated. She looked up at him, and he saw fear in her eyes for the first time since they'd met. "It's not 840 light-years away anymore. The signal is old. Whatever sent it has been traveling toward us for centuries." James felt his stomach drop. How close? If my math is right, entering the outer solar system. Now, today. The call came at 4 a.m. the next morning. "Dr. Kovac, this is Director Homeland Security. Your access to the Atacama array has been suspended pending review. All data from your SETI research is now classified under National Security Directive 447. You are ordered to cease all analysis immediately and report to a debriefing at 0900 hours. The line went dead before James could respond. Within 24 hours, the entire team had been separated. Yuki was reassigned to a radio astronomy project in Japan. Their graduate students found themselves suddenly denied telescope time. The raw data from that miraculous week simply vanished from every server, replaced with routine background noise. At the debriefing, men in suits with no names told James what he could and could not say. The signal was a classified matter of international security. Speaking about it publicly would result in immediate prosecution. When he asked why, they simply said, "Because panic serves no one, doctor." "But if something is coming," he started. "We have it under control," one of them interrupted, in a tone that suggested this conversation was over. James went home to his empty apartment and stared at the ceiling, wondering what under control meant when you were talking about something traveling at half the speed of light toward Earth. 6 months passed. James went through the motions of his job, now relegated to mundane pulsar research. But every day, he checked the private server he'd set up before they shut him down, the one with a backup of those first 4 days of data. At night, he continued the work in secret, refining the calculations, tracking the trajectory. If he was right, and his math was never wrong, the object should be passing Jupiter's orbit by now. Then the news started trickling in. Strange reports, easily dismissed individually, but forming a pattern when you knew what to look for. Amateur astronomers reported seeing an anomalous object near Jupiter before their posts were mysteriously deleted. Several deep space satellites went offline simultaneously, their last transmissions garbled and classified. The European Space Agency abruptly canceled a planned Mars mission, citing technical difficulties that made no technical sense. And then, on a Thursday in February, every telescope on Earth was quietly redirected. Professional astronomers received emails about routine maintenance and recalibration schedules that coincidentally prevented anyone from pointing their instruments at a very specific region of space. James knew what they were hiding. It was here, in our solar system. And it was getting closer. The breaking point came when Yuki called him from a burner phone. "They have visual confirmation," she said, without preamble. "I still have a contact at the IAU. James, it's enormous. 30 kilometers long. It's decelerating now, has been for months. They think it will achieve orbit around Earth in 72 hours. Why haven't they told anyone? Because they don't know what it wants. The ship, if that's what it is, hasn't responded to any attempts at communication. It just keeps broadcasting that same navigational signal on loop. Like we're not even here. Like we never mattered." James felt a chill run down his spine. "They're worried it's not a first contact scenario. They're worried," Yuki said quietly, "that we're the ants at a picnic. That it's not here for us. That we're just in the way." 72 hours later, James stood on his apartment balcony and looked up. You couldn't see it yet with the naked eye, not quite. But if you knew where to look, you could see the stars near Mars flickering strangely, occluded by something massive and dark. His phone buzzed. A single text from an unknown number. "They're evacuating key personnel to underground facilities. Government continuity protocols. No public announcement planned." James thought about his sister in Boston with her 2 kids. About his parents in Ohio. About the billions of people going about their lives, scrolling through social media, worrying about jobs and relationships and what to have for dinner, none of them knowing that something incomprehensibly vast was making its final approach. He opened his laptop and pulled up the backup data. His finger hovered over the publish button on the scientific preprint server he'd prepared. If he released it, the world would know. There would be panic, certainly. Chaos. But also truth. If he stayed silent, he was complicit in the greatest cover-up in human history. The sky changed 3 days later. It started at 11 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. People around the world looked up and saw it, a new star, brighter than Venus, moving visibly against the background of space. Within an hour, it was bright enough to cast shadows. The government emergency broadcast system finally activated. 7 months too late. "This is not a test. An unidentified object has entered Earth orbit. Please remain calm. Stay in your homes. Await further instructions." But there was no calm. How could there be? The object was visible now to everyone, hanging in the sky like a geometric impossibility, all angles and surfaces that hurt to look at directly, like trying to see in 4 dimensions. James watched from his balcony as the ship, because that's what it had to be, completed its first orbit. It moved silently, gracefully, utterly indifferent to the planet it now circled. His phone exploded with notifications. News outlets, finally free to report, scrambled to interview anyone connected to SETI. Friends and family calling in panic. The world demanding answers he didn't have. Then, as suddenly as it had arrived, the ship did something no one expected. It stopped broadcasting. The navigational signal that had been transmitting for centuries simply ceased. In the awful silence that followed, every radio telescope on Earth strained to hear something, anything. For 67 minutes, there was nothing. Then a new signal. Not navigational data, this time. A message. James's phone rang. It was his old lab calling every SETI researcher simultaneously. "Get to your stations," the voice said. "It's trying to communicate." But the message. "Dr. Kovac, you need to see this." He raced to the lab through streets filled with people staring at the sky. The team was already there, gathered around monitors, displaying the decoded transmission. It wasn't a greeting. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. The message was crude, assembled from mathematical concepts and basic physics, the kind of thing you'd use to communicate with a species you'd just discovered. But the content was chilling. Behind. Following. 47 cycles. Run. Yuki looked at James, her face ashen. "It's not here for us," she said. "It was never here for us. It's running from something. And it just led that something directly to Earth." James pulled up the old signal data, the trajectory calculations. If the ship had been traveling at 0.47 light speed, and something was following it. 47 cycles, he muttered, calculating frantically. In their time measurement. That could be weeks. Maybe months. Or days, Yuki added. Above them, the ship began to move again, accelerating away from Earth orbit, continuing its centuries-long flight toward whatever destination it had originally charted. It would not stop. It would not help. It had simply paused long enough to deliver one courtesy, a warning that humanity should have received 7 months ago, when they first detected the signal. James thought about the men in suits who'd told him they had it under control, about the governments who'd chosen secrecy over preparation, about the time they'd wasted, time that humanity could have used to prepare, to build, to run, or at least to say goodbye. Now, all they could do was watch the sky and wait. Wait for whatever was 47 cycles behind, and hope desperately, futilely, that when it arrived, it would prove to be as indifferent to Earth as the ship that had warned them. Because the alternative was far, far worse. James looked at the massive vessel disappearing into the dark, carrying with it the only beings in the universe who knew what was coming. He thought about the signal they'd been so excited to receive, the answer to humanity's oldest question. We were not alone. And now he understood why part of him wished we'd never asked.